I can tell you're worried already. You're looking at all those rectangular shapes and thinking 1,000 rectangular templates. Not so, ladies. Forget those. We're going to learn piecing and repiecing. Actually making our own striped fabric and then incorporating that into either a garment or a quilt. We're going to learn how to do inside quilting. Welcome to Lab Quilting. A little pillow talk first. Do you recognize the chimney sweep or the album block? I bet it changes completely for you because I've introduced solid colors. It's a little hint on how you can design or decorate, especially when you want to match something such as this cityscape done by Mr. Godsey. Also, Indian Trails. This is a pillow from David of Appalachian, and I like the introduction of the stripe, not a print, but just a stripe. Notice how the quilting lines go at an angle, and then all of a sudden a new diagonal is introduced. This particular pillow has a little story to it. I call it Times Square because I bought a little book on Times Square. It was a puzzle book actually, and discovered this design that I adapted to patchwork. And then to complete it, because of the black and white check and the yellow, someone mentioned, well, you've got to quilt a taxi cab in there. And sure enough, I put my mother to work designing a taxi cab, and there's a taxi cab with radiating lights coming from the front and the back of the cab. Our lesson today is Bargello, and what better inspiration that Donna Wilder had than in an Amish quilt. The exciting and radiating colors have been so nicely reproduced in this vest. Notice how the diamond underneath just seems to float behind those navy blue bars. I'm also very proud of my jacket Bargello class. This happens to be done by Wilma Davies, and the wonderful exciting red introducing the aqua and the black. Ruth Flanagan goes from her dark vest to a dusty rose, almost a pastel Bargello jacket. Notice how the slip and sliding of this jacket goes one seam to the next, whereas Glenda Gussman, who's introduced a bright aqua, only does a half slip and sliding. She hasn't gone all the way from one seam to the next. Ruth Templeton goes from the dark colors, and look what that little print does in here. Doesn't that do exciting things, dancing in that diamond shape, down to another marvelous half slipping and sliding with some chevron on the sleeves. Then we can see more jackets, this time Marge Ninnis. Sally Sutherland has done a wonderful monochromatic study, and actually this jacket ended up in San Francisco. It belongs to her daughter, Charlene Nugent. Jane Knox, a full slip and slide from the seams. Ruth Flanagan does a vest. I like Isabel Hannenberg's treatment of more of that aqua. Trudy Mesker does a lovely display, marvelous colors. I think quilters have to be part peacock. Bargello does not have to be confined to garment making. Look at this full-size quilt done by Diane Wold. She happens to be a statistician. I think that helps in her design work. This quilt is entitled Spring Tender, and she is working on a book that will soon give us an insight into strip piecing. She has also done a wonderful wall hanging called Heartthrob. That's a new slant on hearts, isn't it? Joan Piero fully intended to make a garment from her Bargello, but look what happened. It ended up into a wonderful tote bag. A great way to go to a workshop. How to start a Bargello garment. Go ahead, your first step, and invest in some books. There is so much inspiration to be had. Just the mere colors, the styles, whether you want it long or short. Maybe you want a children's vest. Yvonne Purcella has done a wonderful array of garments, patterns. It becomes so inspirational to see these things already completed, then you know you can do it yourself. Keep in mind that if you use a commercial pattern, you will want to eliminate any darts because that restricts or gets in the way of the wonderful Bargello strip piecing that you're going to be doing. First of all, you have to decide on the colors. And of course, sometimes just going to paper first will help. You might want to just draw some lines on a paper, coat it in with some colors that perhaps would be your accent. In this case, it might be a red. Then go ahead and cut those lines apart, knowing that with just some glue, you can reshift these and do a kind of a mock setup, as I have done right here. I would then come and placing this on here, decide, do I want that red to come up one whole seam, or do I want it to come part way? Play on paper first, then you'll get kind of an idea of what you want the overall outcome of your design to be. Then when it comes to deciding on the actual colors, sometimes it might be, as in this case, a print that would inspire you. But go ahead and cut your strips, I would say, between, say, 1.5 to 4.5 inches apart. And when you do that, fold your fabric so that the selvage meet, and you are actually cutting all of these on the crosswise, knowing that then when you sew them together, as I have done here, you will then be recutting on what we would be doing, calling the straight of the grain. Notice that as these have been sewn and then pressed, so all the seams are going in the same direction. Let me give you a few tips on actually cutting. Now when you're using the rotary cutters, and first of all I get asked, do I get a small one or do I get a large one? My answer would be go ahead and get both. This will cut 1 or 2 layers, but when you get into 4 or 5 and 6 layers, you'll want the heavier one. Also, get rid of your thin rulers. They're a little dangerous with the rotary cutter. Go ahead and get yourself a nice thick plastic ruler. Sometimes even the triangles work very nicely on small projects. Then when you get ready to do your actual cutting, it's that initial cut that you make. Now for instance, here is the one where the sew and you can see actually the selvages. You'd want to cut that off straight to begin with. When you do that, use your little finger as kind of a grip on this side. And then when you start cutting, also bring that hand up so it's more or less opposite where you're doing the cutting. Then you know when you pull away, you can just release the excess. That initial cut becomes the guide to recut. Say I was going to start my vest so that I had a wide band to begin with. I would want to start with, if I knew that was going to be a 2-inch strip, give yourself a whole 1/2 inch, a 1/4 inch on either side, and then I'm ready to start my cutting. Move that hand up here. Otherwise, what happens is with a long cut that goes the full length of your board, you get that slippage happening. Once that has been cut, then, and of course you do lots of cuts, you also want to think about doing, as Ruth Kennerson has done on the sleeve here, an interesting chevron design. Now this is the only hint we have of Seminole and what we're doing. Seminole patchwork always introduces that 45-degree angle quite often. And I wanted to show you how to do that with a little mock sample here. Perhaps your regularly sewn bands have been sewn together, and then you wanted to introduce an angle. Take advantage of your 45-degree angle, line that up, and do your cut. Once that has been done, you can turn that and do another cut over here, using this as your edge and getting that wonderful angle in. It's that cut right there which will be opened and then re-sewn to put on your sleeve as an accent color. Now most often you will start by sewing even bands together, as I have shown you here. The important thing when you slip and slide that, and you will notice it the minute you start, is that those bands originally have been sewn together exactly the same. In other words, I want that and that and that always to meet, so that when I line those up, that seam will hit that seam all the way down. That's the good news we're hoping for. Now, there are options in Bargello, and that's what is so much fun in our patchwork. We can go to uneven bands that are sewn together, as you can see here. A wide lavender, a narrow yellow, and then a wider red. That becomes very interesting in our design work. We can also have a lot of fun with a larger piece. Maybe you're thinking wall hanging, or the accent on a skirt bottom. We can go something as wide as that. And then as we recut that, even do irregular bands also, with the idea that as you place these together, you will be slipping and sliding down a bit, and then perhaps you want just a solid piece in between. Have fun with your designs. Introduce some unusual colors. Maybe sew a gold and a purple together. Who knows how this is going to turn out? Perhaps you've been wondering if you can adapt this to a garment as a dress. I'm always looking for interesting yokes that I can do some Bargello work on, as I have done here in this little summer dress. Here is the band that has been sewn together. It has been spliced apart, and then I even went back with a red bias on top of that. As you can see, it was inserted in the front here. And then here's more of an Amish look, very similar to what Donna Wilder had. One continuous black strip in between the bands that have been cut apart. You'd almost think those were appliqued on. Not so, it's all been done on the sewing machine. Even went one step further and trimmed the cuff of the dress the same way. Maybe you'd like to consider, a jean vest. We always like those knock-around vests that we can simply introduce our primary colors with. In this instance, I've used a muslin as the inner foundation. But if you want something for wintertime, you can use a Pellon fleece. Even a cotton flannel will work. Once you've cut your vest out, and you can cut it out a little bit larger if you think there's going to be some take-up with the repeated sewing and flipping. Place the yoke, the denim yoke, where you would like that, and then start with your strips. I feel it's important to play around for a while before you start your actual sewing. You don't know whether you want to start up each time or whether you want to start down, so just place it, and that will give you an idea of how you're going to start sewing. If you'd like to consider a whole jacket, we have done so by cutting out a jacket, the lining, which is a border print, and this time I've used a cotton classic, which gives us a lot of warmth around the body area, the middle part. That would be the front. And then here is the back of our jacket. Notice that I've gone ahead and cut the lining a little bit longer. That allows for any take-up, any drawing that would happen, and that's kind of a smart move. I would also, when you start considering the sleeves, probably eliminate all the batting there, because you know how the sleeves will have pull on it. So there's your sleeve cut out. With matching thread on the bobbin, I can actually start my chevron or whatever design I'm going to put right here. The yoke underneath, I could simply put a print on there. Forget any design work there. I could maybe do some quilting there or some fancy work, maybe even a little applique. Once that is done, I need to start considering, of course, my array of colors. In this instance, I cut them out 2.5 inches wide, and the band is all done. I like to do a lighter color next to a dark, because as you do your shifting, you get that nice impact there. I can cut that as one whole band, or I can go ahead and fold it in half, making certain to line that up. Now here's a place where all of a sudden I see I might have something crooked happening, so now's the time to line this up and trim it off so that I have a straight line going each time. Then I would come in and cut my repeated stripes. Now, we have been promising you that we would have a segment called Breaking the Rules. Well, already we are breaking them because we are not using any templates. We're simply sewing in strips. But how about a wool quilt that also has Bargello in it? Let's go to the sewing machine and see what's happening. We don't always have to think cotton when we're quilting. How about a wool quilt? I call this Chinese lantern, and I know it's wild, but why not? It's got a wonderful big paisley backing to it, and even the border has more paisley on it. So we just decided to think big. Now this is the time to go ahead and get out your drafting paper, because I did this in strips. It is a Bargello type quilt. It is based on 3-inch wide bands that are cut after a long band was sewn together. If you can imagine this, real long, white, 18 inches, and then this one was 6 inches, 6 inches, and 18 again. And I simply alternated my color. That was one band. The other band were regular 12-inch strips cut and then sewn together. Then were they slashed apart 3.5 inches. I created the design by slipping and sliding it and then attaching it to the backing and the batting at the same time. Now, it was a little awesome project, and I might recommend for you to divide this quilt into thirds, because what happened is, once I had the bands ready to be sewn, it was a matter of me finding the center. And of course, this was part of the backing, and it went all the way down, and I would recommend cutting that backing at least 2 inches longer on either end, because it takes up some as you're sewing. But as you get ready to sew that, start in the center and going out, it meant me folding this up and almost rolling it as part of this went in that open area of the sewing machine, and it became very cumbersome. So I might suggest that you do this in third. But the nice part about it is that I am sewing, attaching this, the two fronts, the decorative part, the batting, and the backing all at one time. So I call that inside quilting. I am just finishing up here. Remember, we've got the one center strip that I cut a little bit wider, and then all of our 1.5 inch bands. I'm just finishing up the very end at this point, and I have sewn on one side, and I would then position that to the back side, and then with some pins just kind of anchoring that, I am ready to then start on the other side. I do like to go opposites, and the other thing that I would recommend is that you match your bobbin thread to your backing, and also that all these seams are going in this direction. They're all coming towards me in one direction. So as I picked up my next piece, the seams are going in that same direction. I would simply go on the opposite side, knowing that that would start like so and be sewn all the way down. Now line that up, realizing that it's halfway in between. Start in the same direction, as you can see. Pull that all the way up. I've got my 1/4 inch seam allowance all the way down. As I'm sewing, do note that I've put that even feed foot on again, and that way I don't need to worry about any slipping and sliding. Another thing that you might want to do is to use what we call a stiletto in sewing at the machine. You might just use a long hat pin, or you could even use your seam ripper, but this, it's almost like a little mini ice pick, but it's in lieu of your fingers in there, and you'll be surprised how nice that helps you to maneuver. There are a lot of times when you want to get in there and you don't want to risk your fingers, so just use that one little point and you'll like what's happening there. All the way down, the array of blues and yellows just unfold in front of you and change. And when you get all the way down, it's ready and time to go to the next side. Once one side has been done, and then I would also go to the ironing board. I think it's really important each time you're doing this to go ahead and press that. It really does help to press that back. Get that down flat. Rely on that iron each time. Get rid of your pins and then press that back. You'll all of a sudden, it's not going to hurt your batting, and it will keep that straight. Now you're ready to go to your next one, and this time make sure that your seams are going in the down direction. I am doing what is known as that half slip and slide. Now the minute I flip that back, notice what can happen. Here I am when it was sewn. Then I've cut it apart and I'm going to slip it up. I've decided to go up this time. When I flip that back, I can actually line up that seam with the previous sewn seam, and all of a sudden I have a guide to follow. Maybe that's why we saw so many vests that only went halfway. Do you suppose that might have been their little secret so they could keep it straight as they're sewing? And I would just continue in this manner, sew and flip back, and all of a sudden your wonderful designs begin to unfold. Here's a jacket that I have finished. You can notice that I have added just the print underneath the sleeve, and I think that kind of relaxes the eye so you don't have so much Bargello going on. Here's the chevron. Notice that I have done some machine stitching on the outside. Isn't going to hurt one bit. I finish it by simply putting those edges together and then covering them with some seam tape. It could be a self-cut bias to match the whole coordinated outfit, and I think that works very, very nicely. We hope you enjoy bargelloing, whether it's on cotton or wool. Now, we have an extra little dividend for you today, and I know you'll enjoy looking at a baby quilt. And who wouldn't want to see a baby quilt? We have Beau Cat, and we also have Tie Dog. Now, you've probably also been told another no-no in quilting would be do not use checks. Well, I just couldn't resist this check fabric when I saw it in the store. Not only is there a bright yellow stripe going through it, but there are large checks and small checks. My feeling is that if you isolate the check, in other words, separate the blocks with calico in between, it can be very successful. And look how the kitty cat stands out against a check background. The dog, the same way. The dog, Tie Dog, comes to life the minute you see the buttons placed on his little face. One of these quilts is going to Lauren Kathleen. She was just born, and we're not quite sure which one she's going to choose. Now, to piece these, you do have a lot of templates, and of course you can decide in your quilt how many. I've put 3 in each one, but you can do as many as you like. Each piece block is offset with either the bow or the tie. With a cat, keep in mind, as in all patchwork, you're going to go to your smallest pieces first. For instance, you'd get this portion, the eyes and part of the face done, sewn to the bottom half, and when that piece is sewn, that whole section is ready and waiting for this whole section. Of course, you'd put some pins there. Notice when you get the triangle that small, how you can sew and flip that. His little nose almost disappears. Then these sections would be sewn to the opposite side of the face, and that's practically half of your block, then sewn to your bow. The bottom half, the little feet, have to be sewn on before this side section can be attached. And of course, don't forget his tail over on the side. The dog is much the same way. A lot of pieces, but it's worth it. I mean, you've got to keep that baby warm. I'd also like to mention that what completes it and makes a wonderful little shower gift is the little mobile to hang above the crib and to match the quilts. It was made with these little templates and gets a little bit involved there where you've got the tail on each one. We got a little carried away doing the bows and the ties, and I would suggest forgetting that. Who wants to make those? They're just too small. It's much easier to just go ahead and do bias strips and tie it around the neck. And these were made by just cutting some lattice board, covering them, and then ruffling it, and then hanging them with some satin ribbon. That's a real eye-catcher, I think. Gloria Peterson has taken Beau Cat and made a darling companion pillow complete with lace and bright red bow to go with her quilt. She calls this the best dressed cat in town. Bow tie, you remember the bow tie pattern, just a medley completely covered with calico, and then all of a sudden, one 12-inch block, there sits the Beau Cat. A nice way to dress up any bedroom, I think. She's accented it with a navy blue border all the way around. Now, as if you haven't seen enough quilts today, we have one more for you. Imagine our rectangle that we've been studying all day going askew. I think she has created, and this is Vivian LeBeau from Indiana, she has created a very interesting wavy effect by alternating her colors. She has gone from the darker to the lighter and then has simply sewn bands together. It is true that when the bands come together, they meet at each place, but you can create a wonderful movement in the whole quilt as it goes all across the surface. We look forward to being with you next time. Go to the grocery store, get yourself the biggest roll of freezer paper you've ever seen, because I am dying to teach you freezer paper patchwork. See you next time.
Lap Quilting with Georgia Bonesteel is made possible by grants from Family Circle, the world's largest selling women's magazine. Ginger Incorporated, makers of scissors and shears for home and industry. And VIP Fabrics, a division of Cranston Printworks Company, America's oldest textile printer. Georgia Bonesteel is the author of Lap Quilting, More Lap Quilting, and Georgia's New Ideas for Lap Quilting. These books are published by Oxmoor House and are available in libraries and bookstores nationwide.